Welcome to Charity Therapy, a podcast from Birken Law about building better nonprofits. I'm your host, Jess Birken. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Charity Therapy. Spring has sprung aggressively here in Minnesota, and we've got all the sunshine and all the allergens out today. Everything is trying to grow, but it's so friggin' hot that I don't think anything can grow. It's gasping. We have instant August in the middle of April, and I've got my co-pilot Megan here with me today. Hi, Megan.
Hey, Jess. Yeah, it's so hot, but over the weekend, I will say we did have that first magical weekend day where it was like 65 degrees and sunny, and everyone just emerges from their hibernation from the winter.
Literally everybody I talked to in the last 2 days was like, I got a sunburn.
Yeah, truly.
Because we have all emerged from our mole spaces and have dropped, 8 shades of pigmentation over the winter. And it's just frying crazy right now.
Yep. But today we're talking about organizations going through big changes, but specifically the change of hiring a new executive director. What about when things get kind of messy and we're hiring an insider to the organization? Jess, can you tell us what that means and why it adds a whole wrinkle to the entire hiring process?
Oh, yeah. And this is so common for the small nonprofits, especially, they're not going to hire some executive search firm to do this big candidate search. So when we're talking about hiring an insider, we're usually referring to somebody who's been on the board, someone with decision-making power, or somebody who's got some other insider connection, like they're already on our staff, or they're a person who is on the board or on staff who also owns a business we might hire for their business aspects. And the thing that comes up anytime you're hiring somebody from the inside, quote unquote, is we got to look at conflicts of interest and how to manage those.
Ooh.
Bum, bum, bum. Well, yeah. I mean, and, I feel like we talk about conflicts a lot, and just remember, conflicts are not inherently bad. I'm making the dramatic music joke, but they're not something that you have to avoid at all costs. You just need to deal with them properly. So if, for example, we have a board member who's also got a graphic design firm and the nonprofit wants to hire somebody to do a bunch of social media designs or a new logo, or maybe the board member is offering them a really great deal that's below market rate. That's great. There's still a conflict, right? That board member who owns the graphic design business can't vote on whether or not they're going to get paid to do work for the organization. That board member needs to leave the meeting, not be in there for the discussion, not be in there for the vote on hiring graphic designers. And ideally, we'd get, a couple of other quotes to test what is the actual market rate. They say they're giving us a sweet deal. Maybe we should check. And of course, there's a lot more I could say about this kind of situation, but I have a feeling you've got questions for us that are going to dip into this. So I'm going to end it there.
You are very right. It's almost like you've done this podcast before, Jess. So strange.
Once or twice.
Yeah. Well, I will say one thing you did have wrong. It's just one question today because we have a doozy of a question.
Oh, boy.
There's layers on layers on this one. So are you ready?
I am ready. Bring me this onion. Let's go.
All right. I am the board chair of a small nonprofit with voting members. The executive director position has been vacant for over a year since our ED retired, and I've been filling in on a volunteer basis. The board has turned the ED position into 2 co-director positions, and they're about to open up the application process. I'm planning on applying for one, and my son is going to apply for the other. The positions would answer to the board, not to each other. We're both members of the organization and already have knowledge and a stake in the outcome, and they are familiar with us. Is there a problem with this?
Oh, yeah. Okay. There's not necessarily a problem. Maybe there's many problems. I don't know. But there are definitely some clear conflicts of interest here that we got to deal with if we're going to do this right. And doing it right may lead to outcomes that you weren't anticipating. So let's let's just like tease this out a little bit. So first, you're the board chair. You want to transition to become a paid staff person, the executive director, and a co-executive director, which is very trendy right now. It's like very co-leadership models having a moment. That makes some sense considering that they have been serving in that role voluntarily as an interim since the former ED left. Now, I'm not saying that's a good thing. They probably should have had an interim ED, and, we can have Amy Arcand and folks back on to talk about what that looks like and why you would do that. But let's just say they've been doing a good job. Maybe that's all they had the budget for. This person stepped in, they're filling in, they're doing the best they can for the nonprofit, and they're like, I like this. I like this work and I want to keep doing it. But here's the thing. There can be some big problems when it comes to board members also being paid as staff. Meghan is laughing because I'm sure she's thinking about client situations we have dealt with here. So here's the thing. The executive director answers to the board. They're hired and fired by the board. So obviously, this person who's currently the board chair can't hire themselves. But this isn't like a normal kind of conflict where you just need to leave the room for the discussion and the vote. In fact, I usually tell clients who are on the board and want to apply for a job that the first step is you quit the board. And now when I recommend that, some people will say, well, but if I don't get the job, I'm just going to stay on the board. And I'm like, yeah, I get that instinct. That's understandable. But if you really want this job, you need to be willing to give up your board seat, because let's just like walk down the road of like where this leaves everybody else. Okay. Your fellow board members have to vote on who to hire. And one of the candidates is you, their former colleague or current colleague if you haven't quit. And if you don't get the job, then they still have to go to a board meeting and look you in the eye. Really? Like, that's not going to be weird and uncomfortable for everybody?
And vice versa. You have to work with them too, knowing like so-and-so probably didn't vote for me. And like,
oh yeah, who was it?
Exactly. Like, this is the board reality TV show we all need, but you want to avoid in your own nonprofit.
Yes, right? Especially in states like Minnesota where direct communication is not our strong suit. It's really hard for people to make an impartial decision when they know it's what you want.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very difficult. So have some empathy that that's not a great place for your fellow board members to be. And then let's just say you don't get the job. There's somebody who's better suited to the job than you, which may be true because you just like are there as an interim, right? You're not a professional ED, unless maybe you are, but I'm going to assume you're not. If you don't get the job, how do you think this is going to go for the new ED who gets to be managed by you when you were vying for the same role and didn't get it? Like, I have never heard a faster way to a retaliation type employer-employee conflict in my entire life than having the person who didn't get the job be your supervisor. That's not great. So, number one thing here is you need to resign from the board. If you're serious about this and you care about what's in the best interests of the organization, then you step down and you apply to the position like everybody else. And if you don't get it, then you don't get it and you're not on the board anymore. And that's the risk that you run. So that's like the first part of this question for me. The second part is the part about you and your kid both applying to be co-executive directors of the same nonprofit. And this would be another situation where it would be a clear conflict of interest for you as the board chair to be involved in any hiring decision for your son. So if you're planning on applying, you already know I'm telling you to quit the board. So maybe you're thinking, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to apply. I'm going to stay on the board. Okay, fine. Let's assume that that's your decision. Your son could totally apply. And then this becomes a fairly standard conflicts of interest situation. You got to fully recuse yourself from the hiring process, interviews, looking at applications. You don't want anybody thinking that you looked at all the resumes and then gave your son like the special scoop on who the other candidates were. any discussion around the hiring, any votes on who to hire. And you would need to make your absence from that process like very loud and crystal clear that you are observing the conflicts policy and that if he is a good candidate for the role and would do a good job, there's no reason why he couldn't get this position, but you're never going to be able to participate in his performance reviews or discussion of their compensation or anything related to HR with them, including any discipline discharge issues, right? So now maybe this person is hearing this and they're thinking, nah, I'm going to quit the board and I'm still going to apply. And then we'll be good, right? Because we're going to be a good team, parent and child. It's going to be awesome, intergenerational, all the things. Listen to me right now. The road to hell is paved with your good intentions. Okay? The concept of a parent-child team co-leading a small voting member nonprofit is just ripe for problems. There's already a power differential between a parent and a child, and there's just no way that this goes smoothly 100% of the time. Even if it only goes poorly 20% of the time, that's 20% of the time too much, right? My colleagues who work with family businesses and closely held companies could tell you stories. You do not need to inject an additional layer of family dynamics into a nonprofit that's already full of passionate people. This is just a bad idea. And it's bound to lead to problems. And okay, so what happens when the son has a work-related disciplinary issue? Are you going to feel compelled to do the disciplining because you're their parent? Hey, not your job. Or maybe you'll feel compelled to defend him, even if he deserves consequences because he's your kid. Also, not great. Now, flip the script. You're in trouble at work. What are your expectations for your son and co-executive director? I mean, this is just a mess waiting to happen. Please do not do this. This is a terrible idea. Terrible idea.
The whole concept of working with family is tricky enough even when it's a for-profit business where you do actually have control if it's a family-owned business. Yes. But in a situation where you have to answer to the members of the organization, do you really want your family drama potentially aired out in front of your membership? Sounds great in a fantasy land. In the real world, too much potential for problems.
So bad.
Yeah.
Ew.
And then Jess, so you got the two real big things, but I feel like there's one more hidden element to this question that we haven't even touched on. Because they said we're both members of the organization and already have knowledge and a stake in the outcomes. And Jess, I have heard this rant from you before. So I know you have opinions about whether voting member organizations should hire their members and what that actually looks like.
Dude, yes. Thank you for pointing this out. This is a total layered question. Okay, this is also a minor conflict, that can become a real pain. And we don't really know enough about this particular organization, but a lot of voting member organizations really should not hire their members. I want you to think about this.
Especially because at first it sounds really intuitive.
Sounds so good. They know us. They love us. These are our people.
Yep.
And these are our constituents, and this is our community. And shouldn't we be here to support our community? And aren't we all about our members? But if you hire this person and they are a member who votes to elect the board, then they're going to be voting to elect their bosses. That's kind of weird. That could lead to some drama. And don't forget that often voting members also have the right to remove board members too. So if you want an employee who might also start a petition for removal of a person from your board when they don't like that person, that would be a big problem for an employer-employee relationship, but it would legally be their right as a member of your voting organization. That's not a good situation. I've been the lawyer on situations like this. It's not good. Also, depending on what kind of membership structure you have, you might still be stuck with this person even if you fire them. For instance, let's say they get to be a member simply because they hold a certain license. They're a certain type of contractor, or they live in the geographic area that you serve, and therefore they get to be a member. You may not be able to terminate their membership, even though you terminated their employment. Awkward. So now you have some potentially really mad, or even somebody who's like suing your organization, who's also eligible to run for the board or to get like people all excited about certain candidates that they want backed. Like, this just goes poorly enough that this is a part of my practice. And I want to tell you about it. So, like, I'm just going to stay on this soapbox for like one more minute. I swear I'll be done. What if you hire a member as, say, a 1099 or some kind of vendor, and then you have a breach of contract issue that turns into a court problem? And now you're going to bring one of your members, hey, this is our community, these are our constituents, these are the people we're here to serve, and sue. Like, what? Or you're going to have some big drawn out fight on social media because they're going to take to the airwaves and like tell everybody how horrible you are. These are all things like I have seen happen with voting member hires gone wrong. So if you're going to do something like that, even regardless of whether they're co-executive directors, I'm obviously not a fan of that, but just anything. I'm a huge fan of having some sort of policies and procedures around either not hiring members or what happens if you do hire a member, like whether they can serve on the board, if there's like a timeout period where they can't serve on the board, blah, 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 right? Because we need to define carefully how we interact with our voting members, including conflicts of interest, yes, but just also to avoid drama.
And there are a lot of different kinds of voting member organizations and a lot of different kinds of voting membership cultures. But when you have a lot of people, the potential for people problems go up. So it's like, even if you're like, no, our members are great and no one would ever cause problems like this, it's like, you just don't know. That is something you have to consider when you have potentials like this, when you're trying to hire someone out of your membership.
Yes, especially close communities like churches. A lot of churches are voting member associations. Neighborhood groups are voting member associations. Licensed vendor professional, like we're all the plumbing, heating, cooling contractors in the state associations. You're stuck with these people.
Yep. It's y'all got to get along. There's no getting around it.
These are your community.
Yeah.
These are your constituents.
Yep.
Don't sue each other. You don't want to be. Maybe that's our title. Don't sue each other.
It's a really good like bottom line to shoot for. Just don't sue each other.
Don't get into the spot where you're going to be mad and suing each other or calling me about it,
right,
before you sue each other.
Okay, I feel like we have effectively started to come down from the soapbox, so I have some takeaways for us today. First, you have to pay attention to conflicts of interest. So if you are serving on the board of directors, and whether you're talking about hiring someone or anything else, you need to have a solid conflicts policy and you need to follow it. The end. Number two, when you are working with family members, this happens pretty frequently in nonprofits. There's a lot of situations where family may want to be involved, but you have to think about the family relationships in addition to the working relationships there, and what sorts of roles for different family members will facilitate a good working relationship.
Or not.
Yeah. And so you have to take a look at conflicts, but you also just want to really think about what is best for the nonprofit, not just what is best for each individual person. Same goes with hiring members. Hiring members is maybe not a great idea. Even if it sounds really intuitive, it's something you really want to think through and have policies around, or you want to choose just not to do it because of the potential for issues. And I think that I kind of already touched on this. When you are talking about hiring someone, you have to be thinking about what is best for the nonprofit. Just because someone is familiar with what you've already been doing doesn't mean that they're the best person for the role. Just because they really, really want it and are really dedicated to your mission does not mean that they are the right person to have it.
The next warm body is not necessarily the best candidate.
No, you have to choose wisely. And while you can't head off every potential problem, it's a good idea to even consider what you're getting into when you hire someone like that.
Yeah, I love those takeaways. And I would just say, go in eyes wide open. Stop being Pollyanna and thinking everything's always going to be coming up roses. And I know that as a lawyer, it's like, Oh, you're always saying something's going to happen. But that's because that's what my job mostly consists of. So just go into it thinking about with the end in mind. Begin with the end in mind, and picture how the ending is going to go and how it can go gracefully and going well for your mission. Meghan, this was a good one. Thank you so much.
I'm so glad to be here, Jess. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode and my blood pressure raising about 20 points in the span of 5 minutes, do me a huge favor. Share this with a friend. Please leave us a review, rate the podcast, subscribe. It helps other people find the show. If you have a question or a story to share, I really want to hear from you. Send us a note online. We are waiting for voice memos. I want to play an actual voice memo. No one's going to know it's you. Just do it. Call 612-208-9120. Thanks for listening. All right, folks, that's our show. Be sure to follow me on Instagram or Twitter at Jess Birken. We want to hear from you. Send us a message at our website, charitytherapy.show. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at birkenlaw.com/signup. Charity Therapy is a production of Birken Law Office, PLLC. Our theme song is by Whalehawk. And remember, folks, this podcast is produced for your entertainment and is not a substitute for actual legal advice.